We are seeing a severe crop failure in the south, and what has happened as a result is that cereal prices are shooting up, particularly in the southern regions, and these are the prices of local cereals, so it's sorghum and maize, and poor households predominantly consume local cereals, so they're the ones who are most affected, which means they're then reliant on purchasing cereals. But with cereal prices going up by 75 to 80% in some parts of the south from the same time last year, their ability to access enough food at the house is very strained. From the last GU, where we had 2 million people in crisis, we now have 2.4 million in crisis, which is a 20% increase in 6 months. And these are predominantly the poor agripastoral and the poor urban in the south, and then the cattle and the sheep pastoralists in south and central. The Afghan corridor, where we have large settlements of IDPs, about 400,000 IDPs, and we have seen a deterioration in the nutrition there, again linked to the fact that IDPs, similar to urban poor, are reliant on purchase for their food. So if labour opportunities are limited, they're unable to get the same amount of income into the house and then subsequently the same amount of food into the house.
The situation is deteriorating. It's not as bad as sometimes we've been hearing being painted, but it's heavily deteriorating. I mean, having 20% more of people in need in just 6 months is a serious matter of concern. We are looking very carefully at what is going to happen in the next rainy season, which means GU, which means in 2 months and a half from now. And to get people in the condition to produce what they need to produce for their own consumption and for selling, we have to act now. What does it mean we have to act now? We have to make sure that the people have access to food. So wherever possible, we have to provide space for having food being accessible to people. Access to food comes from the food itself and from the capacity of people to purchase food. So we have to make the people in condition to purchase their own food, and wherever is needed, food aid should be absolutely supplementary and complementary and central in some cases to provide access to that food. And as you know, that can be an area of still concern, because in some area food aid is not easily accessible. So it's needed to have some intervention in specific area where food aid is critical. It's also critical to intervene with the employment mechanism, particularly in the displaced, the area of a high displacement like Afgoi. A lot of people depends on employment. So we have to create conditions for local, temporary, rapid employment to make sure that the people can access their cash. And if we do it now, that employment will lead to a better agricultural season if the rain comes in. So we can save at the same time lives and livelihoods. So the reality is that 600 million probably are not exactly $1 million, will probably not enough to solve all the problem, but it's a substantial, important contribution to address several of those. And we hope that this year there will be the same type of support.
That the conditions facing IDPs are unsatisfactory and worse than in many other countries in the world, and that we need to make a difference to that. For that reason, I established a task force to address those long-term issues of IDPs. They reached agreement with the government of Puntland now to look at the relocation of a number of IDP communities to ensure that land is properly granted to them, so we can start the process more effectively of decongestion. I should say that some decongestion has already taken place, and that the situation is a great deal better than it was last year, but there is a need to continue to address this issue. We also need to look at the issue of employment opportunities for IDPs. They face particular problems, and as the FSNAU survey shows, they will be amongst the most vulnerable because they're totally dependent on the market for food availability.